Okay, Shalom Akim, Kal Halayim La Yahaba Shem Yashab Hashem Kudash, and double honors to the great Muslim apostles and elder bishops of Great Millstone. Yaratazah, they find it edifying and exhorting. Edify means to build up, exhort means to encourage. And when we say Kal Halayim La, that means all praises to. Kal means all, Kal, Kal means all. Halalim means praises. Halal is the singular form, which means praise. So Kal Halayim La, all praises to. La meaning to. And when we say Yahweh, we're saying the Most High's name. The world, in their ignorance, they call him God, but his name is Yahweh, which means he exists. And Yah meaning he, and then Hawa really meaning like the existing one, or exists. Hence he is, he exists, or he is to be. And then when we say Bahashem, we're saying in the name. Ba means in, Ha means the, Sham, Sham means name. All of this in the ancient Hebrew, by the way. And we'll say Bahashem Yahushua. Yahushua meaning he, deliverer. Because that's his purpose, to deliver, really, first of all, the elect of Yahweh, of the Most High Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushua. So it's Yahushua's role to really take up the remnant, man, the 1/3. But that elect within the elect, the governing body, Revelation 14 verse 2, that is it already starts from them, in terms of Israel coming back through the loins of the elect. But the point is, Yahushua's purpose is to deliver, that remnant, man. As mentioned in Isaiah 10 verse 20 as well. And so that's Bahashem Yahushua, Bahashem Kodash in the name, and then Racham in the spirit, Kodash meaning holy. So through the Holy Spirit, that's how we're then connected to Yahushua, and then through Yahushua being our mediator, that's how we get the mercies, the grace, and the strength from the Most High Yahweh. Hence the connection now. But going to the point of the video, Gad was speaking code on behalf of Esau, man. So for Esau's sake, or on behalf of Edom. So Gad was actually helping out Esau to win his wars back in World War II. And I'm going to do some reading into it, so it'll be like an extra history lesson. This is the part 15 of the series. I believe it's part 15. It's part 15. So Yaratazah, I've already finished the book now, so I'm just reading the last chapter of it, which is called it's chapter 19, the unbreakable code of the code talkers. Which the code talkers, and just a brief summary, as you can see here. That's the chapter. After this is the conclusion anyway, which is just a summary of the whole book anyway. So, as I mentioned in part 14, I believe that, if it's worth making a video, then I'm going to make a video. And yeah, just watching, as the Apostle always said, man, you've got to learn to speak in code. And the fact that this is also talking about code talkers, Jake, being the former of all things, they're the ones who helped Edom when it came to sending communications, sending messages via their tongue, which we're gonna get into as well. So pretty much Edom used the language of the Native American Indians, aka Gadites, to communicate certain secret messages. But we're going to get into some history here. Yaratazah find it edifying as well, as I always say. But yeah, just going to read on. Yaratazah get to the key parts as well. And yeah, let's get on with it. So yeah, this is again book here, Native American Indian History. By Captivating History. You can order it on Amazon. It's right there. Yeah, man. So it's a very good read, though. It does help to increase your knowledge and awareness of what Gad, not just Gad as well, Reuben, the Seminole Indians, which the Seminole Indians again are just like a little section of the Native American Indians. They're known as Reubenites within the scriptures. Alright, so the unbreakable code of the code talkers, chapter 19 now, which is the final chapter really. So anyways, the stories about World War II show that, and it's on page 116. So stories about World War II show that it was a very perilous time, one that threatened to tear the world apart as the two civilized, in quotation marks, civilized continents of Europe and Asia tried to conquer the whole world. Which really Esau isn't civilized, man. He's as the scriptures say, he shall be as madmen sparing none. In fact, your answers I need to try and get that quickly. Alright, this is 2nd Ezra 16 and verse 71. It says, start from verse 70. It says, for there shall be in every place in the next cities, a great insurrection upon those that fear the Lord Yahweh Hashem Yahshua. So of course, an insurrection is a violent uprising, man. So we're going to be hated in these times. That's the point. Now it says in verse 71, they shall be like madmen, sparing none, but still spoiling and destroying those that fear the Lord Yahweh Hashem Yahshua. So that's coming to the times where brothers are going to have bounties on their head. As these movies, man, where you got the guy who's got a bounty. Oh, perfect movie was John Wick 3, man. If Akim haven't seen that, John Wick is the it's what to watch, man. Of course, it's I believe it's free on Amazon Prime. It's so-called free. I mean, you still pay for Amazon Prime anyways, but it's free on Amazon Prime. I believe part 1, part 2, and 3 as well. Not part 4. But yeah, John Wick 3, when they had a bounty on him, that's all I'm going to say, man, in case I don't want to spoil it for you, though. But yeah, they had a bounty on him, and he was on the run. Damn, having to invade, you didn't know who to trust. You only had a few people who you could trust there. But anyways, I'll leave it at that. But that's the point. That's how the prophets are going to be. 2nd Ezra 16 and verse 70 to 71, man. There should be a great insurrection against those that fear Yahweh Hashem Yahushua. That's how it's going to be. So anyways, that's because the reason why I brought it out initially was because of the fact that it says Esau Edom will be as madmen, sparing none. Remember, the thief cometh not but to steal, kill, and to destroy. That is his nature. So coming to that right now, let's get back to you. So again, the reason why I brought it out was because I read over here. It says in the book again, it says the unbreakable code of the cult walkers. Stories about World War II show that it was a very perilous time, one that threatened to tear the world apart as the two civilized. And literally in the book, it shows the word civilized in quotation marks. I don't know if you can probably perceive that there. Yeah, right there. Civilized. You should be able to see that. So the reason why they quote it, and obviously read the scriptures there, 2nd Ezra 16 verse 70 to 71, madmen sparing none. And of course, in the scripture, I think is in John 10 maybe, on, I'll just double check it, where it mentions about the thief cometh but to steal, kill, and to destroy. Yes, John 10 and 10. So it says, the thief cometh not but for to steal and to kill and to destroy. I am come that they might have life and that they might have it more abundantly. And really, those of whom take heed to the word of Yahweh Hashem Yahshua. But the thief, Esau Edom, he comes to steal, to kill, and to destroy. And he used Gad during World War II to do that as well, man. Well, really, in terms of sending messages, secret messages. But yeah, Gad fought in Esau's wars, so they leveraged it. All right, continue on. So two civilized quotations, which they're not civilized. We've already spoken about that. Madmen sparing none. The thief, is to steal, kill, and destroy. So they're not civilized, man. These Edomites scattered across Europe, they're not civilized. So anyway, so two civilized continents of Europe and Asia tried to conquer the whole world. People all around the world were drawn into the conflict to deny the thirst for power by the Axis powers. The main aggressors, Germany, Japan, and Italy, had managed to take control of the disproportionately large areas compared to their own geographically small countries. They seemed to be better organized, more knowledgeable about their enemies' movements, and had superior arms. Country after country fell to their attacks, making them seem impossible to defeat. Ultimately, it was some Native Americans who helped turn the tide in a war that would have had nothing to do with them. You see? The destruction of Europe and Asia should have been unimportant. This was not their fight. However, they proved once again that Native Americans were much more than the peoples that the US had portrayed them as being for centuries, which means they're not dumb idiots. They were far more smarter. God was far more smarter than you'd perceive them for. God and Reuben, which could be likened as the Native American Indians. Again, Reuben being the Seminole Indians. Right. Let's see. I'm gonna get to a key part here. All right. So it says here. All right, let me read this part. I'm just trying to read the specific parts that are important here. So, the US, however, wanted to avoid being drawn into another war after all the losses during World War One. So, of course, they need to recover after World War One, which, by the way, the scriptures refer to as the First War. It says the Second World War had been raging since the end of 1930s, but the US only joined after the bombing of Pearl Harbor by Japan in December 1941. So the trigger was Ammonites, flipping, trying to provoke Edom. That was the Pearl Harbor attack by Japan. Again, so yeah, it says here World War One and then Second World War had been raging since the end of 1930s, but the US only joined World War Two after the bombing of Pearl Harbor by Japan in December 1941. So, of course, I did mention about the first and the second war, because the war means destruction. The mass of destruction, or what's the word? The mass, when I say mass, I'm talking about in large amounts. In large amounts, the large amount of destruction happened in World War One and World War Two. Just hold on, let me read it now. Just hold on. Alright, so this is Revelation 11 and verse 14. It says, the second woe is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly. And of course, if there's a second woe, there would have been a first woe as well. So that's, I believe there's another precept that mentions that. But yeah, the point is the woe represents world wars. Second woe, World War II. Third woe cometh quickly. Of course, in the way, 1,000 years, I'm going to get that precept as well. I might even have to do a part 2 for this video if I get deep enough. But it depends though, because I've got business to sort out. But yeah, first, whoa. Hold on. Maybe I'm not spelling it right. There's another, other than Revelation 11, there was another precept that talks about the first and the second woe. Hold on. Let's see if I can get. Well, really, the point's already been proven, anyways, man. So I'm gonna just read this because this is sufficient. Revelation 11 and 14 again. The second woe is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly. You see, so World War One has happened, World War Two has happened, the first woe has happened, the second woe has happened. Now the third woe, World War Three, this is what Esau Edom is gonna be partaking in, man. And of course, these other nations are gonna go against Babylon, and of course, eventually the fight will then lead to the nuclear missiles hitting Babylon. They're gonna say, wait, hold on. we got to direct these missiles to Babylon, to America. And then, Russia and its allies are going to be directing it. So it's going into Jeremiah 50 there. Anyways, let's get back to this. So the history. So it says here the Second World War had been raging since the end of 1930s, but the US only joined after the bombing of Pearl Harbor by Japan in December of 1941. Just as they had in World War One, Native Americans began to sign up to join ranks of the US military to help protect their people. What has long been misunderstood about the native peoples is that the word warriors was never really an accurate term to describe the people who went to war. It is an English word that settlers applied to the people they fought against, because the settlers failed to understand that the significance of the role that the native men assumed when they joined the battle. They were protectors first and foremost. So of course, in the mentality of God, they were more so protectors in terms of protecting their own tribes, their own kind. So it says here, but they were warriors. They were warriors. They still are warriors. It's in their spirit to be a warrior. Gad and Reuben. Now it says here, alright, so they were protectors first and foremost. Their goal was always to ensure that their people survived through whatever means necessary. You see, including a warrior's death during battle. However, the term warrior implies that they were basically a type of soldier. In truth, the native warriors were negotiators, farmers, and whatever else was needed to help the people. And of course, negotiating, farming as well, all for the sake of protecting their people. And whatever else was needed to help the people. Hence why, they actually helped Edom when they were coming in and settling in. But Edom, of course, being Edom, having their wicked nature, they used God for their own profit. All right, let's do this. So it says they were well respected not just because of their bravery, but also for their strength, courage, and intellect. This was the mindset of the Native Americans who joined the U.S. military during both World War One, and Americans who joined the U.S. military during. This was the mindset of the Native Americans who joined the U.S. military during both World War One and World War Two. These wars were an apparent threat to their people, and they responded. Roughly a quarter of Native American population volunteered in World War One, so they were willing to actually serve, help out Esau Edom. Imagine that. That's why Jake's mindset is a done-out case, man. This is your enemy. So it says, of the estimated 350,000 natives remaining at the time the US joined World War II, about 44,000 served in the military. So that's for World War II. So out of 350,000, 44,000 served in the military for World War II. So although the Native Americans should have been immune to the draft, since the US government had made it clear for more than 100 years that the natives weren't American, which really they're the real Americans, because that was the land that the Most High gave them temporarily, of course. Now it says some were still forced into the service through the draft. So, the ones that were, it was probably the ones that, saw Esau as the enemy. They had some level of reason. They were like, no, man, I ain't trying to do this shit. But of course, they were still forced anyways. So it says to fight for Esau Edom. Now it says, hold on. Yeah, so some were still forced into the service through the draft. However, many volunteered So expecting to be put on the front lines to fight, they soon found that their ability to speak their people's language meant that some of them would have a completely different role in war. You see, so that's when Esau was like, okay, we're gonna create our own little code to communicate with. Now I gotta read this as well so I can get the understanding of why Esau Edom decided to use Gad as a as a code to transfer information, a secret code to transfer information. So this is the next part, the hunt for an unbreakable code. One of the biggest problems for both sides was the theft of military instructions. So of course, one military decide, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. They have a plan of action, but then because of the spies that were there, transferring information back to the opposing army, back to the opposing army. The thing is, they were like, okay, we got to get a code here. Now it says, let me read that again. So the hunt for an unbreakable code. One of the biggest problems for both sides was the theft, the stealing of military instructions. Given the scale of the war, coordinating military actions was incredibly difficult. And two sides were constantly spying, you see. They were constantly spying on each other to get the information they needed to know about what the other side was planning and have time to counter it. The Germans developed the Enigma code. And I believe there's a movie that was made based on this as well, called The Imitation Game. It was by Benedict Cumberbatch as well, aka Doctor Strange. My trigger memory there. The Imitation Game. He acted it out, and when it came to the British trying to decipher this German code, the Enigma machine. So let's get to it. So the Germans developed the Enigma code, which was called Unbreakable. This actually appeared to be true for most of the war because the messages that they transmitted were unintelligible without the use of an Enigma machine. The first machine was created in early 1900s and was patented in 1919. Over the years, it was integrated into the German military, and they continued to make changes and tweaks to it to hide their classified information from the other side during transmissions. So it says, following the invasion of Poland, the British gained some intelligence on the code that the Germans had been using for more than a decade. Still, the Germans were constantly changing the code, and the only way to know what was being said was by having an actual machine. So the British finally got their hands on two machines in 1941, and they captured a German trawler. From those machines, they were able to postulate where the main sources of the code originated so that they could follow the messages. The Germans realized that they had been compromised by the end of the war and added updates to their machines to include another layer of code. So, when the scriptures talk about, the wise men of Teman, this is an example of the wisdom that the Most High put within them to be able to create this Enigma machine so that they can then communicate, with each other during the war without being infiltrated by another, and they kept updating the code as well. So anyways, that's the basis there. Let's get on to Gad. It says the US saw how much time and effort the British were putting into deciphering the Enigma code and realized they needed something much more secure to protect their military communications. Some Japanese spies in the US were taking information, passing it to Japanese government, which had resulted in heavy casualties. So, Amon, the Ammonites were poking Edom like, yeah, man, you think you're smart? Watch this. They're poking Edom. Which by poking Edom, I'm talking about, of course, spies, as I mentioned, say in order to gain intel. In the military, they really call it reconnaissance, which is just information gathering. So they had a reconnaissance to send back to their homeland, the Japan, the land of Ammon, the modern day land of Ammon. Now it says, which had resulted in heavy casualties for the Americans sent to fight on the other side of the wall. Now let's see this. So it says, during World War I, some Native Americans were assigned the task of transmitting messages in their native tongues. Philip Johnston remembered how the Choctaw he had worked with had successfully relayed plans during the war. Despite being Caucasian, Johnston had been raised on the Navajo, which is spelled here as Navajo, but it's pronounced as Navajo. So Navajo reservation. So despite being Caucasian, Johnston had been raised on the Navajo reservation, and it was his suggestion to use the Navajo to communicate in their native tongue to counter the Japanese spies Following an impressive demonstration of the Navajo, the Marines recruited 29 members of the tribe. The Navajo is a certain group of people who spoke the Navajo language. Of course, this is like a sub-tribe within within the Native American Indians, the Navajo tribe. It says the Marines recruited 29 members of the tribe. Their main goal was to use their native tongue to develop a code that would be impossible to translate without knowing the Navajo language. 2 weeks later, the code was ready. From this, a code talkers school was created to train more people, since by then the war spanned the entire globe and 29 people would not be enough. Some of the code talkers were drafted. They were part Caucasian. So they say part Caucasian, so some of them could be speckled bird as well, considering God, dealing with Edomite woman as well, you can't shun off that idea as well. So it says others volunteered, and a number of them lied about their age, with the youngest being only 15 years old when he volunteered. A total of 16 Native American tribes joined the coding effort. So this was the beginning, again, just as a recap. Because of the Temanites, aka the Germans, created the Enigma machine, which was like a machine to encrypt their messaging so that no other nation could just look at their messages that's being sent. Because of that, there was Americans then decide, okay, let's use GAD in order to create our own code where you can't decipher it considering unless you know the Navajo language. So that's just the reason. I'm just recapping it, in case Akim didn't understand, but that's what's going on here. All right, so let me get to another point. Just hold on. I'll be wary of time as well. All right, let's read this. So, different levels of coding. Not only did the military and the code talkers develop a code based on the many different Native American languages, they used different levels based on the importance of a message. For minor transmissions, the native people simply relayed a message in their native tongue, knowing that there was no way for the Axis powers, and again, the Axis powers are Germany, Japan, and Italy, if I recall correctly. Hold on. Yep, Germany, Japan, and Italy. So those are the Axis powers. Now it says here for hold on. So let me read from here. For minor transmissions, the native people simply relayed the message in their native tongue, knowing that there was no way for the Axis powers to interpret even the encoded messages. The training for the coded portions of the transmissions was staggeringly easy for the Native Americans as well. Some of the Caucasian code talkers were in awe of how quickly the native people could learn and accurately execute their knowledge. The code was based on the Navajo language, since they were the ones who came up with the code. However, they used something that all Native Americans were familiar with as the basis of the code: North American animals. You see, so God got that salt, man. Israelites, salt of the earth. I'm gonna get a precept soon. Just hold on. So it says, some of the Caucasian code talkers were in awe of how quickly the native people could learn and accurately execute their knowledge. You see, so just hold on. Let me keep reading. Because Jake is smart, man. Yeah, Teamanites, yeah, they have their wisdom. But remember, former of all things. That's what Jake is. In fact, I'm going to get that one right now. I believe it's in Jeremiah as well. Alright, so this is Jeremiah 10 and verse 16. It says, the portion of Jacob is not like them, for he is the former of all things, the origin of all things. That's another way to perceive it. So the former of all things, and Israel is the rod of his inheritance, the strength of his inheritance. The Lord Yahweh of hosts is his name. So again, the former of all things. So it's that, man, don't try and outsmart Jake, man. Heathens are going to realize, yeah, man, it's a losing battle. So yeah, let's get this going. Hold on. So, however, they used something that all Native Americans were familiar with as the basis for the code: North American animals. They assigned animals to each of the English letters for the code. After this, they needed to come up with the ways of communicating military and technical ideas that were not part of their native tongue, such as airplane and tank. For this part, Native Americans relied on their own language to come up with the codes, which meant the code based on Navajo would not be easily translated by the Comanche code talkers. Since they would translate the English, they were given into their native tongues as part of the code. While there are similarities between Comanche and Navajo, so again, another tribe here speaking Comanche, Navajo, Comanche, different Gadite tribes. Anyways, let's read. So while there are similarities between Comanche and Navajo, they are not the same language. Yeah. Just as Spanish is not the same as Portuguese, Italian, or French. If you had a native Spanish speaker and a native French speaker to translate the same English text into their native tongues, they would not be able to decode each other's messages unless they knew the other language as well. It's true. It's true. So the languages are different. There were code talkers state. In fact, hold on. Let me see something. All right, this is a good part. So it says there were code talkers stationed at command centers, but that also meant that there had to be some code talkers on the battlefield. They were in constant peril. This is talking about Gadites here, by the way. They were in constant peril like all the other soldiers, yet like their forefathers, they proved that they were able to keep a level head and complete their missions while the world was exploding, sometimes literally, around them. So of course they had that be strong and of good courage spirit upon them. Gadites, Reubenites, they had that be strong and good courage. Be strong and of good courage, man. Joshua 1 and verse 9. That was their mentality. Even though it wasn't ignorance, because they were doing it on behalf of Esau, Edom. Some of them didn't have a choice. Other ones did it willingly. Now, it says here, all right, what does it say? So complete their missions while the world was spinning, literally. Okay, so the call talkers were given the message they needed to relay in English. They would turn around and mentally translate the entire thing, either into their native tongue or into the code. The speed at which they could do this was mesmerizing. But as one Native American reminded the soldier who asked about it, many of the Native American languages were not written languages. All of their histories had been passed down through oral traditions for millennia. So of course, it means that the stories and the wisdom, the knowledge that they had, wisdom, from the teachings of God, whatever bullshit that they were teaching each other. Of course, some of it would have been true based upon the scriptures, but whatever was taught there. It was passed down, via words, not just written down. Of course, going into the other chapters as well, rarely, if they wanted to mark certain things, it would be via like a family carving on a tree. If I recall correctly, it should be a family carving on a tree, like whatever details in terms of genealogies marked on a tree. But in terms of other things, it was mainly oral transmission, which means you spoke words and you listened. Now let me read that again. All their histories had been passed down through oral traditions for millennia. We listen, we hear, we learn to remember everything. It's part of our training, said Carl Gorman of the U.S. Marine Corps Navajo code talkers. Applying that deep understanding of language to transmitting code was little different than speaking for most Americans. So, of course, J ain't no stupid group of people, man. J got the flipping salt. Now, speaking of salt, let me read this out. So it says in Mark chapter 9 and verse 50, it says, salt is good, but if the salt have lost his saltness, wherewith will you season it? Have salt in yourselves and have peace with one another. And Jake had that, man. Really, Jake was the salt for Esau Edom. The flavor to be able to have that secret tactic of communication. Hence the nickname, the code talkers. So that Jake was the salt, man. Let me read it again. Mark 9 and 50. Salt is good. For preservation. You can use it for preservation. It's used to season the food. Those are the two main functions of salt right there, to season and to preserve. But if the salt have lost his saltness, wherewith will you season it? Have salt in yourselves and have peace with one another. So of course, we're the salt of the earth as well. That's the thing. And there's levels to salt as well. You got the regular table salt. You can see that as Jake of the world. Then you got the Himalayan salt. You got the kosher salt. You got the Celtic salt. All those you got the pink salt as well. All those quality salts, of which have immense benefits for the body. That can be likened as the elect of Yahweh Shem Yahushai. There's levels to qualities of salt. So anyways, man. So Gad can be likened as the salt for Esau Edom, man. Alright. Let's see. Just hold on. Let's see, but that's really the key part. Okay? I want to see if there's anything else worth reading here as well. Alright. Let me read this. So the call talkers were sent to different regions based on their language. The Hopi and Navajo were sent to the Pacific, where their code baffled the Japanese. So, of course, the Ammonites couldn't decipher the language of Gad and the code that Gadites created as well. So, yeah, it says the Comanches primarily countered the Enigma code of the Germans with their superior unbreakable code. That's true. Germans ain't going to be able to decipher, the Navajo code. They won't be able to decipher the tongue of Gad. So imagine that. It's like you have one language, that's one layer. One language you can't even translate. That's one. And then two, imagine creating a code where even if you understand the language, it's like, do you understand the code within the language? That's the thing. It's like that. That's basically what Esau Edom did when working with Gad. So yeah, it says the Meskwakis were assigned to fight in the regions of northern Africa, where Germany and Italy had a tentative foothold. The remaining code talkers were assigned more specific duties as there were fewer of them, and the US tried to use the valuable resource with caution. So of course they tried to use Gad with caution. Code talkers were present for many of the major turning points of the war, One Comanche code talker, Charles Chibity, spoke of his experience. Utah Beach in Normandy was something else. Everybody asked me if I would go through it again, and I said no, but I could train the younger ones how we used our language and let them go ahead and do it because it was hell. Some became prisoners of war and they suffered alongside the other Americans and the prisoners in foreign lands. Many of them recount how they kept faith and prayed to get through the ordeal just as other soldiers prayed to their gods. So that was a time of, I guess, immense testing, considering what they had to go through in World War II. But yeah, man, let me get a few precepts and then, we're going to get this out. We'll close it out. So, Deuteronomy 28 and verse 44. He shall lend to thee, and thou shalt not lend to him. He shall be the head, and thou shalt be the tail. So, of course, Edom, referring to the part within the book, and again, Native American history. There was chapter 19, the Unbreakable Code. How Edom actually leveraged Gad, forced Gad into the military to fight his war. Some willingly came in, but a certain amount also forced as well. And that shows that Esau's the head, man, for this temporary time, of course. So that was the key point right there, man. Deuteronomy 20 verse 44. He shall lend to thee, and thou shalt not lend to him. He shall be the head, and thou shalt be the tail. But that's going to be reversed in the kingdom of Yahushua, man. But the point is, that's what God had to go through. Feeling like the tail, being the tail. Being under Esau, Edom. Alright, let me get this one as well. You know how it is. Genesis 49. The truth. Which God actually means truth as well. And that's why they have army-like characteristics in terms of their behavior. Wasn't it Gad, Manasseh, and Reuben? Feeling like the warriors of Israel. Alright, let's get this. So Genesis 49. Just hold on, Kim, hold on. Alright, so this is Genesis chapter 49 and verse 19. It says, Gad, a troop shall overcome him, Esau, Edom, but he shall overcome at the last. And of course, really, the pinnacle of that, the pinnacle of God also having victory will be, in the time to come when Esau, Edom's kingdom has fell, So that's really the point right there, man. They will overcome too, man. They will overcome. Which really, they put on a fight. They've put on a fight with Esau, Edom again and again and again. And of course, as the scripture says, as scripture has prophesied, but he shall overcome at the last, man. And we're in those last days right now. So just gotta keep that in mind, okay? Keep that in mind. I think that's pretty much it, though. That's pretty much the point. But Yaratazar, he found it edifying, of course, exhorting as well. Something to build up your knowledge, encourage you in the fact that, okay, yeah, it's supposed to be strong and of good courage, as God were. And they look to their forefathers, man. Despite them serving idols, Israel will be in their senses in Yahushua's kingdom, so that's the point. Anyway, Shalom Akim, Yabashim Yashabrakatha, and once more, Kah Halalim La Yahabashim Yashabashim Hakudash, double on Instagram as apostles, and the elder bishops of Great Millstone. Shalom.